He said, "Men like you don't get rich," but his wife's jewelry brand now pays me royalties. I still remember the exact moment he decided my life didn't matter. The Benton Lux Gala was everything I wasn't. Crystal chandeliers. Marble floors. People wearing clothes that cost more than my truck was worth. I drove that truck, a 1998 Ford F-150 with mismatched doors and a dent in the hood, straight up to the valet stand. The valet's face said what everyone would be thinking all night. I was carrying a leather bag containing 3 metal prototypes I'd spent 3 months crafting. Custom-designed jewelry pieces that were supposed to launch Benton Lux into a new market segment. I'd been a freelance craftsman for Benton Lux for 2 years, and these designs were my best work. Charles Benton saw me walking through the main doors and his eyes went immediately to my worn jacket. His smile spread wide, the kind of smile people make when they're about to tell a joke at someone else's expense. "Well, look who drove up," he announced to the small group around him. "Our resident craftsman. Tell me, Eli, is that truck held together by rust or just stubbornness?" The room erupted in laughter. I felt my chest tighten, but I forced a smile. Charles was the CEO of Benton Lux, a luxury accessories empire. He had the power to make my career or destroy it. So I stood there, humiliated, while he continued. "Men like you don't get rich, Eli. You build for men like me." He said it like it was wisdom, like it was kindness he was offering me. Like it was simply the natural order of the world. I handed him the leather bag. Inside were pieces I'd created with my own hands, designs that came from my mind, metal I'd shaped and polished and perfected. "These should speak for themselves," I said quietly. 3 days later, Benton Lux announced their revolutionary new jewelry line. The designs were mine. Every single curve, every intentional detail, every bold artistic choice, mine. But when Charles took the stage at the launch event, he spoke as if he'd pulled these pieces from his own imagination. "Our design team," he said, gesturing vaguely at a group of executives who'd never touched metal in their lives, "has crafted something truly revolutionary." My name wasn't mentioned once. I watched from a corner of the venue as influencers and journalists praised the innovative aesthetic and the bold new direction. They were praising my work. And I was getting no credit. When I confronted Charles in his office the next day, he didn't even have the decency to pretend surprise. "Ideas don't make you rich, execution does," he said, leaning back in his leather chair like a king on a throne. "Learn that, son." Then he fired me. "You're becoming a liability, Eli. You're unprofessional. You're stirring up trouble. And frankly, I don't need you anymore. In fact, I'm going to make sure this industry knows you're difficult to work with." He picked up his phone and started making calls while I stood there. By that afternoon, every freelance client I had contacted Charles's office and pulled their contracts. The man had a reputation in the luxury goods industry, and he was willing to use it like a weapon. If you're enjoying this story so far, please take a moment to like this story and also hit the subscribe button to get notified of our new series. My world collapsed fast. Without clients, my rent became impossible to pay. My girlfriend, Monica, started making comments about how dreams don't pay bills. She left me 3 weeks later, taking the apartment's 2nd-bedroom furniture with her. My workshop lease was terminated because I couldn't afford the deposit renewal. My bank account dwindled from thousands to hundreds. I was 34 years old and essentially starting over. I moved back to my small hometown in rural Pennsylvania, to my father's old garage that had been sitting empty since he passed 5 years earlier. The building was falling apart. The tools were rusted. But the space was free, and it was mine. That first month, I didn't leave the garage. I worked 18-hour days, sketching designs by hand, crafting small metal pendants and charms on old equipment I'd restored piece by piece. I made maybe $50 in my first week selling small handmade charms at the farmer's market. But I wasn't broken. I was angry in a way that focused me instead of destroying me. My friend Ralph, who worked at the local hardware store, came by most evenings. "You'll rise," he told me one night, watching me work by lamplight. "Just don't rush it." So I didn't rush. I created an online store under a fake brand name, Turner Iron Crafts. I posted photos of my work on Etsy and social media. The pieces were raw, authentic, real in a way that luxury goods from expensive corporations could never be. People responded to that. Not many at first. But enough. 6 months after Charles destroyed my career, I received an email from someone with the username, L. Benton. She wanted to place a bulk order, not huge, but substantial. 30 pieces, mixed designs, all handcrafted. She wrote, "Your work has soul." I haven't felt that in a very long time. I didn't connect the name immediately. Benton is a common name. I didn't know that Charles's wife existed, honestly. I was too focused on my own survival to follow celebrity gossip about wealthy executives. She specified exactly what she wanted, interlocking rings with minimal design but maximum meaning. "Symbolism for freedom after confinement," she wrote. There was something vulnerable in that request, something that told me this wasn't just a customer transaction. This was someone working through something personal. I agreed to create the pieces and offered her a royalty-based contract. If she wanted to sell these designs, I wanted a percentage. She agreed immediately. When I looked at her delivery address, Whitestone Drive, the wealthy neighborhood of Charles's city, my stomach dropped. The pieces she'd ordered were launching as a brand. And the brand name was Lena Grace Jewelry. I realized, slowly, who this was. Lena Benton. Charles's wife. I sat with that information for 2 days, unsure if I should cancel everything and disappear. But I didn't. Something in me wanted to see where this went. Something wanted to know if there was any justice left in the world. I packaged her order with the same care I'd given every piece I'd ever made. Each pendant was wrapped individually in tissue paper. Each ring was placed in a small velvet box. I included a handwritten note on cream cardstock: "These pieces are about what you build when you're breaking free. Wear them with intention." When Lena received the order, she responded within hours. "These are perfect. Exactly what I needed. I want to launch these as a full collection. Are you willing to be the exclusive craftsperson?" We negotiated terms through email. She was professional but also kind in a way that felt genuine. She didn't try to lowball me. She didn't treat me like a vendor. She treated me like a partner. "I know your work is worth more than what I'm offering," she wrote. "But this is what I can afford right now. If it succeeds, we renegotiate." I accepted. The first batch of Lena Grace Jewelry pieces went live on a beautiful website that she designed herself, simple, elegant, authentic. And they sold. Not like a wildfire. But steadily. Like people had been waiting for something real and had finally found it. Within 3 weeks, she reordered. Within 2 months, she quadrupled her order. Her pieces were being featured on Instagram by fashion influencers who loved the raw aesthetic and the real craftsmanship. The jewelry world was noticing. And I was beginning to understand that I wasn't just an employee being paid. I was becoming something more. I was becoming a partner. One evening, while packaging a shipment, I noticed something on the return shipping label. The address was registered to L. Benton, Whitestone Drive. My hands froze. Whitestone Drive. That was Charles's neighborhood. That was likely Charles's house. I sat down on my workshop stool and let the reality settle over me like a heavy blanket. This beautiful woman who was supporting my work, who was building something genuine and real, she was married to the man who destroyed me. She was sleeping in his house, living his life, wearing his name. Or at least, she had been. Something in those emails, in her request for freedom after confinement, suggested she wasn't wearing his life much longer. I made a decision. I would continue working with Lena. I wouldn't tell her who I was. I wouldn't expose her to the drama of my history with Charles. But I would craft the best pieces I'd ever made. I would help her build something so undeniably successful that no one could ignore it. And if Charles connected the dots, well, that would be his problem to solve. The fire that had been burning quietly in my chest since that night at the gala suddenly flared brighter. This story is about to take a turn you won't expect. Hit subscribe now, ***. Lena Grace Jewelry launched officially 6 months into our partnership. The timing was deliberate. She'd built a following on social media, created anticipation, and released exactly enough pieces to create scarcity without losing momentum. The collection was called Unbound, a series of jewelry pieces designed to celebrate freedom and self-determination. Every piece I'd crafted told a story about breaking free from something. The interlocking rings that felt both connected and separate. The pendants shaped like open hands. The bracelets with clean, decisive lines. Fashion bloggers went insane for it. Influencers with millions of followers started wearing Lena Grace pieces. The aesthetic was raw, authentic, and in direct contrast to the over-designed, logo-heavy jewelry that dominated the luxury market. Within 4 weeks, she was getting national media attention. By week 8, she had a waiting list for custom pieces. By week 12, she'd had to increase her manufacturing capacity 3 times just to keep up with demand. I was working 60-hour weeks, and I still couldn't fill orders fast enough. Ralph started helping me in the workshop. We hired a young metalworker named Jasmine who had just graduated from art school. And I still couldn't keep up. Lena Grace Jewelry was becoming impossible to ignore. And that was going to be a problem for Charles Benton. The article dropped on a Thursday morning. I saw it posted on social media, shared by someone in the jewelry industry. The headline read, "The wife of Benton Lux CEO launches jewelry line that's outselling her husband's brand in weeks." Below it, a professional photo of Lena, standing in a design studio with some of my pieces displayed on elegant wooden pedestals. The journalist had done their research. They pointed out that Benton Lux's sales had stagnated while Lena Grace had exploded. They noted that Charles's brand was increasingly seen as outdated and corporate, while Lena's was considered innovative and authentic. They even mentioned that industry insiders were predicting the end of an era. I read the article 3 times. The third time, I laughed, actually laughed out loud, for the first time since Monica had left me. Charles had called me a failure. And now his wife was proving that I was worth something after all. My designs were worth something. My craft mattered. I didn't sleep that night. I drove to the overlook where I used to go when I was thinking about big decisions, and I sat in my truck, looking out at the valley below, and I let myself believe that maybe the universe wasn't completely unjust. Maybe there was such a thing as poetic justice. Charles saw the article too. Lena told me this months later, when we'd become genuine friends in addition to business partners. He confronted me at dinner, she said. Demanded to know who was making my jewelry. Asked if I was sleeping with my designer. I felt something protective rise in my chest when she said that. What did you tell him? I told him that I was building something with someone who respected me. Someone who saw my vision instead of dismissing it. He got angry and stormed out. She paused. I filed for divorce the next day. That conversation happened much later, after everything had unfolded. But the confrontation at dinner was the moment Charles realized something was slipping through his fingers. For years, he'd controlled everything, his company, his employees, his wife's choices. And suddenly, his wife was building something without him. His wife was successful in a way that didn't depend on him. And his wife was doing it with help from someone he'd already destroyed. His assistant started making calls, trying to figure out who Lena's designer was. She ran database searches, contacted mutual acquaintances, hired someone to watch Lena's deliveries. Charles was determined to find out who I was. And he was about to get his answer. The email arrived on a Monday morning, professional and carefully worded. It came from Anonymous Holdings LLC, offering to purchase the exclusive rights to my designs. The offer was substantial, 6 figures, enough money to rebuild my life in comfort. All I had to do was sign over the intellectual property. Ralph read the email over my shoulder. "That's definitely Benton," he said immediately. "Sounds like he's trying to buy you off." I stared at the email for a long time. This was the moment where I could have walked away. I could have taken the money, disappeared, let Charles win by simply choosing a comfortable life over continuing this battle. But I didn't feel like walking away anymore. I felt like standing. I responded to the email, asking for a phone meeting to discuss terms. The anonymous investor agreed. And then I did something that probably wasn't smart but felt absolutely necessary. I traced the email's IP address. It took me 2 hours of work, but I found it. The IP came from Benton Lux headquarters. Ralph whistled when I showed him. He's not even trying to hide it. I scheduled the meeting for 3 days later at a neutral location, a hotel conference room in the city. I was about to walk into a room with Charles Benton for the first time since he'd fired me. And I was about to see if the universe actually did believe in justice. I dressed carefully that morning, clean jeans, a simple black shirt, boots polished but worn. I wasn't trying to impress Charles. I was just showing up as myself, the person I'd become since he'd destroyed me. I arrived at the hotel conference room early and watched him come in, and for a moment, I barely recognized him. Charles looked older than I remembered. Smaller. There was something diminished about him that had nothing to do with his physical presence. He saw me, and his smile was sharp and confused at the same time. "The garage boy," he said, extending his hand. I didn't shake it. "I'm no longer a boy, Charles. I'm a partner in one of the fastest-growing jewelry brands in the country." "You?" His smile faded. "I came to make you an offer," he said carefully. "I want to buy the rights to your designs. I'm willing to be generous." I leaned back in my chair. "That's not actually why I'm here." His eyes narrowed. "Then why?" "I wanted to see your face when you realized that you were wrong about me. That men like me do get rich. We just do it differently than men like you." I stood up. "And I wanted to tell you directly, Lena Grace Jewelry is not for sale. Ever. At any price. My designs are going to make more money than Benton Lux has seen in decades. And you're going to watch it happen from the outside." I walked out of that meeting and felt something settle inside me. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just clear about who I was and what I was building. We're getting close to the moment that changes everything. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Charles couldn't legally touch my designs because he'd never officially owned them. When I'd confronted him after he stole my first prototypes, I'd kept the original sketches and dated blueprints. I had email records of my initial designs dating back years. My lawyer built an ironclad case proving that every design Charles had stolen was originally created by me before I ever worked for Benton Lux. When Charles threatened to sue, claiming I'd stolen company concepts, I produced all of this documentation. His legal team realized immediately that they had no case. Charles couldn't admit in court that he'd stolen my work, because that would prove he was a thief. He tried threatening me privately, tried intimidating my suppliers, tried everything he could think of. But none of it worked. I was too established now. Lena Grace was too successful. And the internet was starting to piece together the story. Someone on Reddit found my old Etsy account from when I was starting out. Someone connected the timeline of my work to the timeline of Benton Lux's releases. And suddenly, the narrative was clear. a struggling craftsman had created innovative designs that a powerful CEO had stolen. The craftsman had rebuilt himself independently, and now his new work was outselling the CEO's stolen designs. It was the kind of story people wanted to believe in. It was justice in narrative form. Lena went on a popular talk show to discuss her brand's explosive growth. The host asked her about her designer, wondering if she'd finally reveal who the mysterious craftsperson was. "He's someone who builds success instead of stealing it," she said carefully. "He's the kind of man who creates something beautiful and lets it speak for itself. In a world of people who fake expertise, he's the real thing." She didn't name me. But she didn't have to. The implication was clear. Within 24 hours, that interview clip had been shared 10 million times. Speculation about Lena's mysterious designer exploded on social media. Fashion bloggers started investigating. Journalists started calling. And Charles watched all of it, knowing exactly who she was talking about, knowing that his secret was about to become public. That's when he made his final mistake. He approached Sophie Tran, a former marketing executive who'd worked on my freelance projects before Charles destroyed my career. Sophie had always been respectful, always treated me like my work mattered. She still worked in the industry, though not for Benton Lux. Charles asked her to dig up dirt on Lena's designer, offered her money, tried to bribe her into helping him. Sophie came directly to me. "He's panicking," she said. "He knows the connection is about to become public, and he wants ammunition." I made a decision. I could have exposed Charles publicly, could have gone on every talk show and told the story of how he'd stolen my work and tried to destroy my career. I could have used social media to build an army of supporters who would crucify him for his arrogance and dishonesty. Instead, I decided to do something different. I decided to win by not playing his game. I focused on expanding Lena's designs. I created new collections, each one better than the last. I licensed our work to major fashion houses globally. I opened the expansion of my workshop, hiring more craftspeople, training the next generation of artisans. I was building something that would last, something that had integrity woven into its very foundation. Charles was desperate and diminishing. I was calm and growing. The contrast was stark. I didn't need revenge through public shaming. I was getting my justice through undeniable success. That's when Lena asked me if I'd be willing to attend a major industry gala as her business partner and co-designer. She was ready to tell the world who I really was. The gala was held at a 5-star hotel in the city, the kind of place where the jewelry and fashion elite gathered to celebrate themselves. I wore a suit, nothing fancy, but well-fitted and genuine. Lena wore a dress made of flowing silk, and she was absolutely radiant. When we arrived together, cameras flashed. Journalists called out questions. Influencers whispered to each other. The energy in the room shifted. People knew something significant was about to happen. Lena took the stage to receive an award for Most Innovative Emerging Brand. She stood at the microphone, and the room went silent. "I need to tell you something," she said. "I didn't build this brand alone. This brand exists because of one man's craftsmanship and one man's integrity. Eli Turner is a metal artist, a designer, and an innovator. Every piece of Lena Grace jewelry was created by his hands. And his vision. I'm accepting this award on behalf of both of us." Spotlights swung to where I was standing. Cameras turned. The room erupted in applause. I stood there, humbled and vindicated simultaneously. And I felt Charles's presence before I even saw him. He was standing near the back of the room, his face flushed, his jaw clenched. He watched as the industry finally recognized what he tried to hide. He watched as they celebrated me. And he watched as his irrelevance became complete. After the gala, Charles confronted me in the parking garage. His voice was low and dangerous. "You stole my wife," he hissed. I looked at him calmly. No. I didn't steal anything. Your wife made a choice to build something with someone who respected her. You lost her because you were too arrogant to see what you had. He came at me, actually tried to grab me, but security stepped in. They'd been watching, anticipating exactly this kind of outburst. Charles was removed from the garage, his anger explosive and uncontrolled. By the next morning, video of the incident was everywhere. The headline read, "Disgraced CEO loses control after former employee's major industry recognition." It was the final nail in the coffin of Charles's reputation. His board of directors called an emergency meeting. Investors demanded his resignation. Within a week, Charles Benton stepped down as CEO of Benton Lux. Within a month, the company filed for bankruptcy. The empire he'd built on stolen ideas and arrogance crumbled like paper. My lawyer finalized a new contract with Lena. It was simple but powerful. Lena Grace Jewelry would pay me a permanent royalty on every piece sold. Not just until the contract ended. Permanently. For life. It was the kind of agreement usually reserved for mega-successful artists or athletes. But that's what I'd become. My income soared quietly and steadily. For the first time in my life, I wasn't worried about money. I wasn't lying awake at night doing math about rent and food and basic survival. I was free in a way I'd never been before. Meanwhile, Benton Lux's assets were liquidated. Charles's personal wealth was decimated. His accountant delivered the news: he was essentially broke. All the money he'd made through theft and arrogance was gone. He'd become the very thing he'd told me I'd always be, a man without prospects, without opportunity, without a future. If you're captivated by this journey of turning the tables, hit subscribe now. Charles sent me an email exactly 1 year after his public meltdown. It was short: "You proved me wrong. Men like you do get rich." I never replied. There was nothing to say. The conversation had ended. And I was done with him. The next day, tabloids reported that Charles was leaving the city, moving to a small town somewhere in the Midwest, trying to start over as an anonymous nobody. There was a poetic justice in that, him experiencing exactly what I'd experienced when he destroyed me, just with the advantage of starting from a position of comfort rather than total destruction. Lena's divorce was finalized cleanly. She kept her brand, her designs, and her freedom. She never asked me for anything except the continuation of our business partnership. And that was enough. That was everything. A major fashion conglomerate approached us with an acquisition offer. $500 million for Lena Grace Jewelry. Lena and I sat down in my workshop, which had expanded into 3 buildings now, employing 40 craftspeople, and discussed it carefully. "We could sell," she said. "I could retire. You could retire." I looked around at the artisans working with metal and stone, creating beautiful things with their hands. "I don't want to retire," I told her. "I want to build. I want to create opportunities for people like me." We made a counteroffer. They could buy 40% of the company, but we retained creative control. They accepted. The money from that sale was extraordinary. But instead of buying myself something luxurious, I did something different. I expanded Turner Works International, my new company that employed metalworkers, jewelry craftspeople, and artisans. I created apprenticeships for young people from working-class backgrounds. I funded scholarships. I built something that would create opportunities for others the way I'd wished someone had done for me. Ralph became my business partner officially. Jasmine, the young metalworker, became our head of design. We were building something that mattered beyond just jewelry. We were building a community of craftspeople who'd been underestimated and overlooked. Charles showed up at my studio one afternoon. He looked like a ghost of himself. Diminished, aged, tired. He asked me quietly, "How did you do it? How did you rebuild?" I was working on a custom piece, my hands shaped by years of metalwork, my attention focused on the intricate details. I didn't look up. I worked, I said simply. I didn't give up. And I didn't compromise my integrity. You took shortcuts. You stole. You lied. I didn't. He stood there for a long time, watching me work. Then he looked around the studio, at all the craftspeople creating beautiful things. This is what I could have built, he said quietly. If I'd just been decent. I finally looked at him. Yes. You could have. He noticed one piece on a shelf in the back of my studio. It was the very first pendant I'd ever created for Lena. Over the years, I'd made it iconic. That piece had been featured in every major fashion magazine, worn by celebrities, become the symbol of Lena Grace Jewelry's entire brand. Charles recognized it. He understood exactly what that piece meant. He left quietly after that, and I never saw him again. But sometimes I'd hear through industry connections that he was working as a consultant somewhere small, helping other people build businesses, trying to become someone decent. I hoped he found peace in that. Months after the acquisition, I stood on stage at a major business forum. They'd invited me to give a talk about building authentic brands, about integrity in business, about how to succeed without compromising who you are. The auditorium was full of entrepreneurs, young business people, investors, and journalists. I looked out at the faces and thought about how many of them probably felt like I had felt, overlooked, underestimated, told that people like them don't get rich. Never let anyone define your worth by what you drive or where you start, I told them. Rich isn't what's in your bank account. Rich is what you build when no one believes in you. It's the character you maintain when people are trying to destroy you. It's the people you lift up on your way to the top. That's wealth. Everything else is just money. I looked into the audience and saw Lena, standing, smiling with pride. I saw Ralph, wearing a suit that didn't quite fit him but that he was proud of anyway. I saw Sophie, who'd warned me when Charles tried to use her. I saw Jasmine, who'd gone from a struggling art student to the head designer of an internationally recognized brand. We'd all made it, in different ways, on our own terms. A year later, I drove my old truck, the same 1998 Ford F-150, though fully restored now, out of the city toward my expanded workshop. But I wasn't alone in the truck. I had a young man sitting next to me, someone I'd met at a career fair, someone whose guidance counselor had told him he wasn't college material, someone who'd been told his whole life that people like him don't get rich. I was taking him to the workshop to offer him an apprenticeship. I was giving him what nobody had given me when I was starting out. I was showing him that there were people who believed he was worth something. And I knew that's where my real wealth lay. Not in the money. Not in the accolades. But in the lives I could touch and transform just by believing in them when the world didn't. I passed a massive billboard on the highway. Lena Grace Jewelry's latest campaign. A close-up of one of my pieces, shining in soft light. Below it, text that read, "Made with purpose. Built with integrity." That piece paid me royalties every single time it sold. But more importantly, it represented something undeniable. It represented proof that real power doesn't come from appearances or arrogance. It comes from integrity. It comes from showing up every single day and doing your work with honesty. And it comes from remembering where you came from and lifting others up. The voice in my head as I drove sounded like my father. Never measure a man's worth by the shine on his shoes. He'd been right. Charles had all the shine. He had the expensive suits, the luxury vehicles, the mansion, the connections. And he'd lost it all because he had nothing underneath. I had nothing but my hands and my integrity, and I'd built an empire. The young man next to me asked, "Mr. Turner, do you ever regret it? Like, do you ever wish you'd taken Charles's first offer? The 6 figures to sell your designs?" I thought about that for a long moment. No, I said finally. If I'd taken that money, I would have been comfortable. But I would have lost something essential. I would have known, deep down, that I'd given up. That I'd let someone else win. And that knowledge would have poisoned everything else I built. This way, I gestured at the rolling landscape, at the truck, at the workshop we were driving toward. This way I know that everything I have, I actually earned. Everything I built honestly. That's worth more than any amount of money. We arrived at the workshop as the sun was setting. It was a sprawling complex now, nothing like the broken-down garage I'd started with. Inside, craftspeople were working on pieces, some my designs, some their own. Turner Works International had grown to employ over 100 people across 3 locations. We'd trained dozens of apprentices. We'd funded scholarships for young people from working-class families. We'd created a business model that prioritized integrity over profit, though somehow we'd managed to do both. The young man looked around in wonder. I introduced him to Ralph, who took him on a tour. And I stepped into my personal studio, the small room where I still did my best work by hand. On the wall, I'd hung something. It was a framed article from that old gala, the moment when Lena had publicly acknowledged me as her partner and designer. And next to it, I'd hung a small piece of metal, rough, unpolished, just as I'd first shaped it. I'd engraved on it, in my own handwriting, "Men like me don't get rich. We just build something worth it." 5 years after that first confrontation with Charles at the hotel parking garage, I sat in my workshop after hours, and I picked up that piece of metal again. 5 years of growth, of success, of building something that mattered. 5 years of watching my designs sell in boutiques across 50 countries. 5 years of seeing young craftspeople discover their own talent and build their own careers. 5 years of knowing, absolutely, that I'd made the right choice. The old truck was parked outside, recently restored but bearing the same license plate from years ago, Turner CO. It had become iconic in its own way, a symbol of staying true to who you are. I could have replaced it 100 times over. But I kept it because it reminded me. It reminded me of the man I was when Charles laughed at me. It reminded me that nothing external, not a truck, not clothes, not a job title, defines a person's value. His value comes from what he creates, who he lifts up, and whether he can look himself in the mirror and know he's been honest. The closing line, the one I'd use years later in speeches and interviews when people asked me about Charles Benton and what I'd learned, he said, "Men like me don't get rich." He was half right. Men like me don't chase money. We make something worth it. And in the end, that's worth far more than he ever had.